Hello and welcome to Make 5 of the 12 Makes of Christmas. I'm Stephanie Soebbing from Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and today's tutorial is one of my favorites. This is a gift that I have made many times when I was a new quilter because it's fun, fast, easy, and it is very inexpensive. You just need a charm pack and some coordinating yardage, and it doesn't have to be from the same line. I know we tend to kind of collect charm packs. They're cute, they're fun. And so if you collected it and you can't get that same yardage anymore, or you get it from a shop like us where we bring in a lot of pre-cuts and not necessarily all of the yardage to go with it, you can get what's called a blender. And that is, we have an entire section of this on our website where you can search by color of what will go with this, because you just need it for the binding and the back. And especially for a table runner, it just doesn't have to match perfectly. Solids also work really well for this as well if you're just trying to get something to have a little bit of color from what you have in here. But this is super fast, super easy. It's very beginner friendly. So if you just need a quick gift, or if you're a newbie and you just want to share your love of quilting in gift form with your family member like I did when I was a new quilter, this is a great project to get started. And the pattern is totally free for it. We're calling it the Charm Pack Table Runner. I know, very original, but it's super easy to do, and you can get the pattern for free over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is open up your charm pack, of course. And this is Dreaming of Snow by Rebecca Jones for Clothworks. And I chose this one because it really could be out all holiday season. There's nothing that's overtly Christmas about it. So if you don't celebrate the holiday, or you just want something that's going to be able to be out anytime it's snowy and cold, this is a good one to go with. We have several of these left, and we'll also link to where we have all of our charm packs of holiday and Christmas fabric as well. So now what you want to do is kind of arrange it by color, because we're going to first arrange everything in an order that's pleasing to us. So I'm going to separate, there are some dark blues, light, medium, and so on, until I kind of have all my colors out, because then I can evenly space them out and have them look pretty cute when everything is said and done. Quite a few with light backgrounds, and then less of these. So it's not like it's always an equal number, but as long as you kind of have an idea, then you can kind of space them out. So now I'm going to lay these out into 4 rows of 10, and so that will use up 40 of our 42 charm packs squares, and so you will have 2 left over at the end of the day. And so that is totally fine. I'm also in the instructions going to include an option to where you can make 2 of these. It'll be a little smaller, but you can make 2 and use all your charm packs, so you can get, you know, more bang for your buck if you do it that way. So now I'm just going to start laying this out in an order that's pleasing to me. Again, trying to make sure that I am mixing up these colors, so that way I don't end up with like a whole bunch of dark blue in one area. I want those to be evenly distributed across the table runner. All right, so I've got everything laid out on my table. Unfortunately, our overhead camera is, I can't get it far enough away because it's too big. But what you're looking for is that you have a nice mix of fabric. I try not to have any 2 of the same prints next to each other. So like here, I've noticed that these 2 mushrooms are right next to each other. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna swap this with a little bit of a lighter print over here. Actually, that's a mushroom too. There are lots of mushrooms in this one. So we're just gonna move that around a little bit. And you really can move these around, you know, probably forever, and you'll still eventually find something that's right next to each other. But as long as the color is moving around, so you don't have any of the dark blues all in one area, that they are spread out over the quilt. And same with, like, you know, this rust, it wouldn't look very good if you had a lot of rust ones all right next to each other. Then it's going to look good in the end, and it just is a nice little representation of the line. It's great if you really like a collection, but you're just not sure what you would do with it. This is a real nice small project that you can pull out every once in a while and then put back away seasonally, or however you want it to be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew one entire row together, and I'm not going to press anything. I'm just going to sew the entire stinking thing together, and then we're going to do that for all the rows, and then we will press in opposite directions. All right, so I've got my first 2 pieces here in the row, and I'm just going to flip those guys right sides together. And there's always questions about where are you supposed to line up when you are sewing with pinked edges like this. And I like to line my edge of my foot up with the exterior, like the topmost of that peak. I find that that works really well for me when I'm putting these together, but there definitely are varying opinions on it, and you can feel free to do what you want. But I typically tend to do that because usually when I'm doing this, I'm either doing half square triangles that I'm going to trim down later, or it's a project like this where as long as my corner and seam is consistent, it doesn't really matter so much as long as it is the same. All right, so I'm going to clip those threads, open this guy up. We're not going to press. We're going to save that to the very end when we have all of our rows joined. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the next piece that's going to fit right here. So I've got that grabbed. So now I'm going to flip these guys right sides together, and I'm just going to repeat adding more and more as I go until this entire row is joined. All right, so I've got one entire row together. That took me about 8 minutes, so that just tells you how quickly this goes. And so now I'm going to lay that down, and I'm going to sew my other 3 rows together too. Again, I am not going to press any of this until all 4 of my rows are sewn together. And again, we're making 4 rows of 10, or you can make 3 rows of 7 and to get 2 of these. And all those details are in the free pattern, Charm Pack Table Runner. I know, not a very exciting title, but it tells you exactly what it is. And you can get that for free over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. So I'm going to sew all my other rows together, then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to press this to make joining those rows super easy. So I've got all my rows sewn together. I haven't pressed anything yet, and I just kind of have them stacked on top of each other so you can kind of get a look of what this is going to look like. And if you followed me for any length of time, you know that I love, love, love to press my seams open. But when you're a beginner, sometimes it's easier to press them to the side, especially when you have really simple projects like this one, because then we can press all of our odd rows going one way and all of our even rows going the other way, which means our seams are going to nest and make it really easy to get really great joins. So that is a really good option when you're a beginner to get those seams nice and tight and perfect. So I'm going to show you how to press, and then we're going to pin these guys together and complete our table runner. We are almost done. I've been sewing for maybe like half an hour, 45 minutes to get to this point. So you definitely, if you're working on this at home, can get it done in under 2 hours. Probably without an issue, as long as you have some sewing experience. It may take a little bit longer if you're like brand new, but it definitely can be an afternoon or weekend project if you are brand new. All right, so I'm going to press all of these seams so that they are going underneath the right side of the row. So to start that off, I need to fold this down, and I just have this first seam up at this point, and the rest of them are all just coming towards me. And I'm going to cover some of the major mistakes that I see people make. We've done a lot of beginner classes at our brick and mortar shop, and so I see this all the time. And so we're going to cover what the big mistakes are and how to avoid them here. So what I'm going to do first is set my seam. That is where you just kind of set the iron over your seam, and it helps the thread kind of become one with the fabric, makes for a stronger seam over time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this back, and I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to press that down and out. And that finger pressing kind of already pushes it so that your seams are going to be underneath this part of the fabric, which is exactly where we want them, because sometimes you'll get it pressed where like some is going this way and some is going that way, and then your seams don't lock the way they should. Now, here is the second issue that I see people make. What they do is they just plop their iron down right on top of the seam, and what that does is it can sometimes put a pleat in, and you may have sewn a perfect 1/4 inch seam, but then all of a sudden everything's not fitting right, and it's because the seam is not as open as it should be because you pressed in that pleat. So what you need to do is put your iron completely on the side of the fabric that you're going to be pressing away from, and just drag that up onto the seam like that. And then you should have a nice flat seam here with no pleats or anything, and when you flip it over, everything should be going in the same direction. So you're just going to repeat doing that again and again as you go down. So now we've got our second seam here. We're going to go ahead and set that seam. I'm going to finger press it. And because this one is already pressed going this way, I can put my iron on that and not worry about putting a pleat in. But if it is an unpressed seam, you do not want to set the iron straight down on it. You are going to screw something up at some point, because you want this to be a nice tight flat seam with no lumps or bumps or wiggles or anything crazy like that. All right, so I'm going to keep going on that process until I've done the entire row, and then when I do the next row, we're going to press it in the opposite direction so that those seams nest. So I kind of like to lay my rows out once I finish pressing them. That way I can really easily see what direction all my seams are going. In this case, they're all going to the right. So I know for sure all of these seams need to go to the left. So what that means is instead of starting on the left side, I'm just going to start on the right side. So that way when I press this, my seam is going to be going in this direction. So same process, just make sure your seams are going in the opposite way. It really doesn't matter which direction you pick first, as long as every other row is going in the other direction. So I'm going to finish pressing these rows, and then we're going to show you how to pin and get this baby finished. All right, so I've got my bottom 2 rows laid out here, and I've got everything pressed in the opposite direction, so it's going to be really easy to butt these seams up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my rows right sides together with the seam between the 3rd and the 4th row on top. Now I'm going to show you from above what this looks like. You can see that I've got one row going one way and one row going the other. Now this next part is almost easier to feel than it is to show on camera. So what you want to do is you're going to take your seams and you're just going to kind of drag them until they bump into each other. That should kind of feel like a threshold. So if you were to lay this flat on your table, you should just feel like a little rise where those seams are coming together. If you feel a gap, then it means that your seams are too far apart and they're not going to meet and have a good join. If you feel a pronounced bump, then it means that you probably have overlapped your seams. So you'll kind of get used to the way that that feels. But when you look at it from above like this, they should be meeting very precisely and be going in opposite directions. Once you're confident that you've lined everything up correctly, what I like to do is put my pin right in the right side of that seam allowance. Here's why. So when you're sewing, you're going to be going through your sewing machine like this. So we're going to sew along until we have our needle down in the first half of that seam allowance, and only then are we going to pull our pin, because when that needle's down, it kind of acts like a pin and holds everything together until we can sew over the rest of that seam. Now, here's some things that I see people do that will make it more difficult for you to have good joins. So some people, rather than pinning here, they'll pin straight down the center. And sometimes what that can do is it can move your fabrics away from each other. I've seen people pin way far away from the edge, which also doesn't help because you're going to be sewing a 1/4 inch away from the edge of your fabric. And so you need it to be pinned together right where you're going to be stitching. I also see people do this, which does the same thing, because your pin is coming out about, in this case, like 3/4 of an inch away from the edge of your fabric. So what it really needs to be pinned at is I tend to put my pin in right around where that 1/4 inch is, and then have it come out about a 1/2 inch away from the edge of the fabric. And that will ensure that I've got those seams held together exactly where it's going to matter and where you're going to see it. And pinning any other way, as if you're not pinning right where you're going to be sewing, is not going to be as precise. So this is the way I pin absolutely everything that I do, and so you want to do the same if you want to have really great joins. So I'm going to keep doing that down the rest of my rows, then we're going to sew these guys together and join our halves, and our top is done. As long as we're talking about precision, I figure now is the time to get on my soapbox about the proper foot to use for when you are piecing. So you can use a 1/4 inch foot, or you can use your standard foot, which is what this one is, and a 1/4 inch stitch on your sewing machine. And this is what I prefer, and it's because there's nothing in the way to get in the way of anything. So when I am sewing, I can sew right up to that pin and until I get right over this, and then I can pull my pin and go. Now, a lot of times sewing machines will come with a 1/4 inch foot that has a guide on it. And so there's this little flange right here on the side, and that gets in the way. There's a lot of instances where this is really great, like if you're doing top stitching or you're working with cork or bags or anything, this is a great foot to use, but it is not good for piecing, and here's why. When you are sewing, when you get to this point, that flange hits your pin. And so you have to take out your pin, but you are a good 1/2 inch away from where that seam joint is. So if you were to pull this pin now, everything could shift on you, and then all of a sudden those perfect joins that we spend so much time pinning, you can say goodbye to them. So I do not recommend feet like this with that little guide for when you are doing piecing. They are great for a lot of things, but piecing is not one of them. You want to make sure you are either using a 1/4 inch foot or your standard foot with a 1/4 inch stitch setting on your machine, and you'll have a lot better results. So I'm getting going on sewing here, just maintain that 1/4 inch stitch. And when I get to that seam, I'm gonna go ahead and stop with that needle down like we talked about, and only then do I remove that pin, and that will, this needle is kind of acting like a pin and holding those seams together. So now I can go ahead and zoom along until I get to my next seam and repeat the process. All right, so I've sewn my 2 halves together, and now I'm going to go ahead and just press this toward the top. You could press it toward the bottom too, and that would be totally fine. But what you would do is you would just set that seam all the way down your row, and then you're going to, again, finger press that up, and then with your iron completely on row 2 in this case, you're just going to drag it up over the seam between row 2 and row 1, and you're going to continue doing that all the way down. And that will ensure that you have really great seams with no pleats or anything in them. Everything will be the size it should be, and we've got some awesome joins here because we took that time to pin. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to press my other row toward the top too, so that way all the seams are just going in the same direction. Again, it really doesn't matter which way you go as long as you pick a direction and stick with it. So go ahead and do that. Then we're going to just join your halves together, and then you are all done. All right, so I've got everything pressed and I've got everything in my 2 halves. So what's left is to flip them right sides together again. And your seams for this should also be going in opposite directions. So in this case, they're going this way on the bottom row, and the top right row, they are going in the opposite direction. That way you'll be able to pin everything and it'll look great. If for some reason they aren't, you either press something going the wrong way, or maybe you just flipped one going the wrong direction. So try flipping the row upside down and see if that works and helps you out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pin this and sew it just like we did when we joined our top 2 and our bottom 2 rows. Then we're all done. So here we go. We have got our nice large table runner all together. It is looking super cute, and it is just a nice one. It's called Dreaming of Snow is the fabric line that I used here. We've got plenty of other charm packs that are holiday themed as well. This one's kind of fun because it is not specifically Christmas. So if you either don't celebrate the holiday or you want something you can leave out all through January, this is a great one to use because it just is not inherently Christmassy. But again, you can use this with any charm pack you have. So if you've been collecting them for a long time, this is a great way to use them up, and then just get something that coordinates from a nice blender or solid that you can use for your backing and your binding, and you're good to go. I've completed this entire thing start to finish, including the time it took me to talk to you guys on camera, in about 2 hours. So this is definitely a fast, fun gift that you can get together for this holiday season. And that's the point of this entire series, is to highlight a bunch of quilty crafts that you guys can do to give away, to share your love of quilting with others, but that you definitely can get done for this Christmas. I want to talk over a couple of ideas that you guys can use when you're quilting this and to get it all completely finished. So the easiest thing to do is going to be to use your ruler to mark straight lines going across the diagonals in both directions, and then just use your walking foot to quilt straight down one diagonal and then straight down the other diagonal, going across the entire table runner. That's how I used to do these when I was giving them away as gifts when I was a new quilter, and that's probably what I'm going to do for this one too. I'm just going to use a nice white thread. Usually the lighter the thread, the better it hides, and that will look great with this. And another option, if you want to be more adventurous, you can use one of our quilting stencils. We did a video just yesterday on the holly leaf meander, or 2 days ago now. 2 days ago. I'm getting my makes of Christmas messed up. But it is the holly leaf meander, and so you can practice your free motion quilting on it. The other thing you can do, and this is a saver if, say, your points weren't as precise as you wanted them to be, you can go buy a pack of buttons that coordinates with your fabric, and you can just sew, just layer and base everything as normal, and just sew your buttons right over all of your joins. That will secure everything and hold it together, and it will be able to be washed that way, but it will help hide any mistakes, and you can also avoid quilting if you're going to do it that way. You can actually install buttons using your sewing machine in most cases, but you can also hand stitch those if you enjoy doing things by hand. Thanks so much for following along. Again, you can get the pattern for this for free over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. It is called the Charm Pack Table Runner. I know, not very original, but it is exactly what it is, a Charm Pack Table Runner. You can use this with any charm pack that you have. And again, I did the larger version, which uses 40 of the 42 charm packs. You could also make 2 smaller ones using all 42 of the charm squares and kind of get a little bit more bang for your buck. So that's an option for you. And of course, we have got lots of charm packs to choose from. So if you've enjoyed this series, a great way to say thanks is when you see a project you want to give a go to get the supplies from us. Thanks so much for following along, and until tomorrow, happy quilting.